Hello, everyone, and welcome into TexAgs Rewind. We've got Dom DH. Is that right? Is that your name?
Yeah.
Dominic. We like to call him Dominic.
I went on a rant a minute ago, so it's all right.
He used some words that we can't use on the internet. We can use them, but we
on
choose
YouTube.
not to. Well, we could, but we're not going to.
There's subscribers.
It's still a family. This is a family show.
Yeah, and he was talking all about loving on your family. Matt Browning, Kelly Adams, Chase Hernandez, the fan show guys are here. Guys, we had a fun show.
We did. It went from just completely, scorched earth to we're going to win that game. We're winning.
And unfortunately, he's actually right. It did go from scorched earth to we're winning.
But are we winning?
Beginning to end.
Yes, we're going to win this game.
Which game are we talking about?
I said we weren't going to win Mississippi State last week, and I was right. We're going to win this game. We're going to beat
He's
Bama.
talking about Alabama.
At Bama.
If
we
we were
this
an
Aggie team.
If we were going to give out like grades of optimism, I know you finished the show the most optimistic. Who was the most optimistic of you three?
Oh, Chase, yeah, 100%.
Who was the least optimistic of you? Yeah.
Kelly's he's a mean man.
And it's not usually me. But this
Kelly-
week it was.
Kelly also tweeted or texted me at the wrong time last
He
week.
did, too.
I just wanted to drop that bomb and walk
Oh my
away.
gosh.
Hey, Mike Leach is
Bad
still his
timing.
daddy, though.
Oh my God.
I wanted to drop that bomb and walk
He
away.
texted me as I'm finishing up my post-game rap to tell me how right he was about Mike Leach, and I was not having that. No.
So we
I
had
did, I
Stephen
just
McGee
texted
on the
the whole
show
group.
today. We had Ryan Swope on. Aaron Torres showed up. Stick around. Watch it.
Did you read that or did you
No.
know? That was good.
Thanks, man.
Pretty good. There you go. Who do we have?
Well, much to the chagrin of our man Tomas Romo, I still don't have Caleb Williams in my top five.
Okay.
But he's closer. I'm still going number 5, Michael Penix, the Washington quarterback, who's had an up and down year this year, or was up and down showing in that loss to UCLA, but he still passed for 345 yards and 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. But overall, he still has 1,733 yards and 16 touchdowns with just 3 interceptions. So Michael Penix is having a good year. One inconsistent performance I'm not ready to completely dismissing. Number 4, maybe he's too low, but I put Bryce Young, the Alabama quarterback, 7 of 13 yesterday last week for 173 yards, but that was before his injury. Right. So he was on his way to a big game, had an interception. But even with that 7 of 13, 173 yards, he's completing 67% of his attempts for 1,202 yards and 14 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, has 3 rushing touchdowns too. So he's having a good year. He may not be having the year he had last year, but he's still having a good year. Number 3, I'm sticking with Stetson Bennett for now. I'm going to give him one more week to get out of the funk that George is in. He did have his worst performance of the season in a 26-22 victory over Missouri, but still threw for 312 yards. I mean, that's your worst performance. Didn't throw a touchdown pass and only completed 54% of his passes, but he still has thrown for 1,536 yards, 5 touchdowns, and just 1 interception, and has 4 rushing touchdowns. So he needs to pick it up, but I'm not ready to bail on him just yet.
All right.
Number 2, I dropped him down, C.J. Stroud.
He was one last
Yeah,
week,
he's been one all year.
Yeah.
The quarterback from Ohio State, he didn't need to be great in that 49-7 win over Rutgers, but he's still pretty pedestrian. He completed fewer than 60% of his passes. He threw for 154 yards, 2 touchdowns, had an interception. That doesn't sound like your Heisman Trophy type numbers. Overall, though, he's thrown for 1,376 yards and 18 touchdowns and been intercepted twice. Now, you'll like my choice for number 1.
Well, we're going to find out this weekend if he's going to stay there.
We are, and it's one of those rare cases where he moved up without playing because so many guys in front of him had pedestrian showing. So number 1 as of now on my list is Hendon Hooker, the quarterback from Tennessee. He's 6th in the nation in total offense. He's passed for 1,193 yards and rushed for 175. He's thrown 8 touchdown passes. So not a huge number, but it's 2 in every game. He's only played 4 games and no interceptions. He has 3 rushing touchdowns. But if you're looking for a guy that's the most outstanding, if you watch him, he's the reason that Tennessee is unbeaten. But like you said, David, he's playing LSU, which if you're not
LSU at home,
if you're not paying close attention, that LSU defense is sneaky good. LSU has given up 17 points or less in each of its last 4 games and hasn't given up more than 24 points in a game all season.
why is execution so difficult in this system?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, a lot of people have been asking that very thing. I think that it requires so many different position groups to adjust and be able to not only understand offensive scheme, like, what do I run on this route? What's my depth? But you also have to be able to understand what the defense is doing. So let me give you an example. So if I line up at wide receiver, I'm the X and I have an 18-yard comeback, but all of a sudden it's cover 2, well, then I have to convert my comeback to a go route. Or, you could have the comeback versus man is also a go route. So there's a lot of different adjustments. Or if they bring a pressure where it's will free safety and they overload you and you can't pick it up, well, guess what? That X receiver now needs to run a slant route, right, to replace that. So there's hot routes that can also be involved. And so I'm not in that room, and I don't know exactly what they're teaching, but I do know that those are the types of examples just for a wide receiver. So I don't just need to learn how to run a comeback. I have to learn what a defense is in cover 2 and what that looks like. And so it's not a perfectly clean look every play. And so guys can say, "Oh, I thought it was really more of a quarters coverage, so I ran my comeback," and the quarterback throws the vertical, and he's like, "No, it was cover 2." And so when you put young guys out there and you're forcing them to know a lot about, football and understanding defense, it can be tough. And then offensive line, it's the same thing. Protections, they get these 3 down fronts. It's confusing. Which one's Mike? Which one's standing up? Which one's considered a down lineman? Which guy are we working to? Which guy is the backs? It makes life really, really confusing. And as a quarterback, they're having to do all that, right? So they're doing run pass kills. So there's multiple play calls that he sends in and says, "Okay, if it's cover 2, I want you to run this play. If it's single high or quarters, I want you to run this play. And oh, by the way, if they're pressuring, you need to adjust your protection and make this guy the Mike. You need to make sure everyone gets lined up. You need to do the shifts. You need to do all that in less than 40 seconds. And oh, by the way, I may not get you to play until 25 seconds. And so hurry." It's tough, man. Playing football is tough.
So since you mentioned all that, then I think it's not maybe a surprise that when A&M was really good 2 years ago, it's because they had a senior quarterback and 4 senior offensive linemen, and I guess some older receivers, I guess. Can you expect to be good unless you have guys that have been in the program at key positions for at least 3 years?
It's a fair take, and I think that the results have to be the determining factor there. And even when Kellen was quarterback, I think he drew some criticism at times for plays that if you were in the quarterback room, you probably knew weren't his fault, for receivers not adjusting routes or not doing the right thing correctly because they were young at that time. So they kind of held him back from some people's opinions, in his last year under Jimbo. So it's tough. The other type of system is like, you don't worry about hots, you don't worry about protections, you don't worry about run pass kills. You just line up, you call the play. It's got answers for everything. And if it's not there, just improvise, run around. And if you can't do that, just throw it away, and we'll call a play on 2nd and 10.
Talking to Stephen McGee here on TexAgs Radio, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. I keep saying, Stephen, that I think the offense is complicated and there's issues there, no doubt about it. But when the offensive line does their job, everything flows better. And I think that's still, there's drops, there's fumbles, there's issues all over the place. But if they can get that part of it, I give them a fighter's chance.
I agree. And to me, so much about football nowadays, especially in college, is about tempo. I feel like your offense is playing downhill, and I feel like we're always fighting the play clock. How many snaps since Jimbo has been head coach are snapped inside of 10 seconds on the play clock? It's hard to have really good football plays when you're fighting the play clock. And on the flip side, if you look at a lot of the teams that are putting up tons of yards, there's times in which they play with great tempo. And I'm not saying that that's an absolute, but getting up and not having the perfect answer, but let everybody play fast. I remember Mike Sherman, he had a West Coast system. It's very wordy and it's very complex, and certain guys could handle that. But I remember he was frustrated because this is college. Like, you don't have as much time as he did with the Houston Texans or the Packers for these guys to prepare. It's not their business, so to speak. And he ended up changing a lot of that in the subsequent year. He literally called one word, and it'd be like Kansas, and it would be, strong right slot, act 4 chip, 478, F flat sit, kill 32. And everyone knew that Kansas meant the formation, the shift, the play call, everything was all included. It just made life easier so that guys can get up and play fast. There's something to be said for football players that can just line up and play fast, right? And keep football simple, right? You don't have to have all the answers. And I think that's something that Jimbo's probably going to have to battle with. It's like, man, I love having all the answers. I love being able to control, and dictate to a defense at the line of scrimmage what we want to do. But some of those great offenses don't have all those answers built in, but they play with great speed, and they let the guys just use their athleticism.
Let's just say that the team that played against Arkansas shows up, okay? And that team was pretty good for about a half of that game, maybe 3/4, but I would just go more half of that game. How does that affect the Alabama game, considering we don't know what quarterback's going to be out there?
It's a fascinating game, and when you say we don't know what quarterback, I assume you're talking about Alabama, right? Because A&M, we don't have official word on Max Johnson, right, either. So,
we don't. Nope.
I mean, you just talk about really quick. We'll get back to Bama, A&M in a second. You talk about across college football. I don't ever remember a week like this where KJ Jefferson, Will Levis,
Quinn Ewers,
Dylan Gabriel, Quinn Ewers. Yeah, we don't I don't ever remember a week. Injuries happen this time of year. By the way, Jaden Daniels got banged up. He'll play on Saturday, but he's well less than 100%. I just think it's a crazy year. Now, in terms of A&M, what was the question again? I got sidetracked. I'm sorry. One more time.
Considering that they've only played a couple of really good quarters, a very long,
Sure.
convoluted question, but a little bit of good offense, very small sample set. But the fact that Alabama may be without their main guy in Bryce Young, how does that maybe play out? How does that affect the game?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I know the Aggies were playing at the same time as Alabama last week, but they were a different They were a different team when Jalen Milroe was in. And I think I think even if Bryce Young plays, I think it's probably pretty safe to say Alabama still has 3 weeks before their bye Halloween weekend. So I don't think we're going to see the super dynamic Bryce Young running around making plays. I think even if he plays, he's going to be limited. I think the key is, and it's cliche and it's obvious from the A&M perspective, you just got to limit big plays, because the one thing that Alabama really didn't do against Arkansas, they didn't really sustain a ton of drives after Bryce Young went out. They had big chunk plays. Jahmyr Gibbs had that run that everybody's talking about. A couple of the wide receivers did step up, but there wasn't those sustained drives. And so I do think A&M's personnel is a little bit better. And I think they're better built to limit that Jahmyr Gibbs 80-yard run, that, wide receiver run. Jalen Milroe had a big run of his own that I don't think resulted in a touchdown, but it was still a 40, 50-yard gain. I think that's the key, right? I think if Jalen Milroe is the quarterback, make him sustain drives. And we didn't see it against Arkansas. I don't know that he has the ability to do it. I know it's different road versus home. A&M's a different opponent, but I don't think we saw that in the first game, that he has that ability to do that.
How intrigued are you by this Tennessee-LSU matchup?
Well, I think it's the most, it's funny, right? I think there's the kind of national, we feel like we have to talk about these teams because they're the biggest brands. And I think A&M, Alabama, Texas, Oklahoma fits into that category. I think Tennessee, LSU is the biggest game because, if Tennessee wins, then all of a sudden you're probably looking at worst 9-3, potentially 10-2. And with the way Georgia's playing, I don't think they're going to win the East. Let's be 100% transparent there. But with the way Georgia's looked the last 2 weeks, I don't think it's inconceivable either. But you got to win this one because you obviously have Alabama next week, and then you play Georgia later in the year. From the LSU perspective, listen, I'm one of the people. I've been a Brian Kelly guy. I mean, I'm sorry he couldn't beat Alabama when he was at Notre Dame. Oh, my goodness. A small Catholic school that has real, in the middle of nowhere, can't beat Alabama that recruits it's like the criticism of him was that he won all the games that he was supposed to, and he couldn't beat Alabama and Clemson. And so I've been a fan, but if he wins this one, they're 5-1. They went 6-6 last year. They're 5-1 this year. They have a top 10 win at home. They have a couple solid wins outside of that, a win at Auburn, a win against Mississippi State. I don't know if LSU does win, but I think if they do win, it's hard not to argue that they're ahead of schedule. Now, they still have some tough games ahead. They obviously have the Aggies. They have Florida next week. They have Arkansas still. They have Ole Miss still. And I don't think 10-2 or 9-3 is their ceiling or whatever. But I just sit there and say, I do think if they beat Tennessee, I think they're ahead of schedule. And all those people that said Brian Kelly's not a good coach, I think he's a great coach. What he did at Notre Dame in this era was incredible. Now we'll see. He obviously would have to take it to another level at LSU where the last 3 coaches have won a title. But I think Saturday would prove that they're well ahead of schedule.
Because this team, momentum affects them more than I've
Very
seen other
much.
teams, good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, which game we can go to? The Arkansas game. The A-chain run that put them in potential to score changed the way that offense ran.
The strip and
the fumble, 96-yard touchdown changed the way this team. Also, look at what happened against Mississippi State. They were losing that game. There's no doubt about it. But if they score a touchdown there or if they kick the field goal, it's 14-6. But instead, what happens? They block the field goal on a guy who was offsides, and now it's 21-3, and you're like, it's over.
So to answer your question, how fixable is the offense? In my opinion is that we have, just gobs of talent. There's absolute studs all over that offense. I mean, we've got good players. We've got talent there. We've got Devon A-Chain, who's one of the best, if not the best. He's one, if not the best in the SEC running back. We have talent. We have talent everywhere. We just have to get them in the right position. We have to scheme better. We have to coach them better. We have to have a better overall. So the question would be,
and they got to
can it be
execute
fixed?
it better.
I think 100% it can be fixed if we change some things. Whether it's simplified a little bit more. We need. Hey, if we're struggling on the offensive line to block, why don't we roll people out, get guys going in motion? Let's get some wide open receivers. I watched football all weekend, and every single team, pro, college, everything, had plays where they had people open. I don't see us doing that. For some reason, every time we're playing, it seems like all of our guys are covered. And so, yes, I think it can absolutely be fixed if we just would be willing to change some concepts, some ideas, make some changes in regards to our play calling.
All right, he's still talking about he thinks Mike Leach is the reason A&M lost that game. Mike Leach is great.
Mike Leach is A&M kryptonite.
But he is not why A&M lost.
But he's kryptonite.
A&M is the reason they lost. So
Superman
royally.
can't work with kryptonite. Mike Leach is A&M kryptonite.
That's why
Like, share, subscribe, comment.
He's
We'll
got
see you
stuff to
next
do.
week.
He's ready to go. He's got to go. He's got to go bet on A&M. We'll see you guys next time.